Attorney General Pam Bondi is accusing a federal judge of misconduct. A Justice Department complaint alleges that Judge James Boasberg made improper comments about the Trump administration earlier this year. Boasberg is also threatening to hold the administration in contempt over the deportation on migrants to El Salvador. David Spunt following all of this for us.
Amigos, una vez más nos queda claro que Trump está utilizando el Departamento de Justicia como una herramienta para su venganza política. Al parecer en este gobierno, si un juez no hace lo que Trump quiere, se convierte en enemigo del Estado. Y ahora su fiscal general Pam Bondi está cumpliendo su rol como la verduga política. Esta vez el objetivo es el juez James Boasberg, al cual Trump odia desde el mes de marzo, si no me equivoco, y un poco más antes. La razón fue el juez que tuvo el atrevimiento de aplicarle la ley. Recordemos que todo empezó en marzo, cuando Boasberg bloqueó esta orden de deportación masiva que la administración de Trump trató de imponer bajo una ley que fue creada en 1798, la Alien Enemies Act. Y pues, es una ley que fue pensada en tiempos de guerra. La excusa de Trump, que eran miembros de una pandilla. La realidad, que eran deportaciones sin tener pruebas, sin juicios y totalmente ilegales. Recordemos de qué se trataba.
And now this morning, President Donald Trump is reacting after a federal judge blocked his use of a centuries-old wartime law to deport accused migrant gang members.
The accused gang members arrived in El Salvador over the weekend despite the court order. CBS 8's Regina Yerita live near the border with how the president is responding to all of this. Regina?
Yeah, good morning, guys. That's correct. A U.S. District James Boasberg ordered over the weekend that the Trump administration stop deporting people without hearings under the Alien Enemies Act.
Pues James Boasberg frenó esa locura y Trump hizo lo que siempre hace. Lo puso en la mira. Pues el día de hoy, señores, hace apenas unas horas, la fiscal general Pam Bondi anunció con orgullo que se acaba de presentar una denuncia formal por conducta indebida contra el juez. La razón, supuestamente hizo comentarios inapropiados sobre el presidente. ¿Qué fue lo que dijo exactamente Boasberg? Que la administración de Trump podría desencadenar una crisis constitucional al ignorar fallos judiciales. O sea, simplemente hizo su trabajo. Advirtió sobre el peligro de un presidente que se cree por encima de la ley.
For just a moment, this DOJ complaint talking about how that Boasberg has made these comments and that it potentially has compromised him as far as being impartial on the bench.
They have said in this complaint, which was signed by Chad Mizell, he's the chief of staff to Attorney General Bondi, that on March 11th at a working breakfast at the Judicial Conference of the United States, that's an annual gathering at which designated judges gather to decide business relevant to the federal judiciary, that at this breakfast, Boasberg made some comments that he was concerned about the administration's compliance with court orders. He did so, according to this letter, in front of Chief Justice Roberts, who, according to some other reporting, pushed back and said, that's not really a concern that I have right now. I think that they have been very polite and solicitous to the judiciary. But according to the letter, they say that this violates certain canons of judicial ethics, and that in particular, Judge Boasberg was trying to influence Chief Justice Roberts as well as other judges in the federal judiciary. And as a result of that, they have asked Judge Srinivasan, the chief judge of the D.C. Circuit, to open an investigation and to take a number of steps, including potentially reprimanding Judge Boasberg or assigning another judge to the Alien Enemies Act case, and the worst of all, to consider recommending him for impeachment, which is the only way that a federal judge with lifetime tenure, Ariel, can be on what you call the firing line.
Yeah, and not necessarily talking about just bias, but also influence, as you mentioned, over other judges and potentially lawmakers who were in the room as well. Dahlia, federal judges are usually barred from making out of court, I should say, public comments about impending matters. Would these remarks then qualify under that?
It's hard to see how. This is a closed-door meeting, as Lisa said. This is the Judicial Conference, which is a body that is supposed to service exactly these sorts of questions. This is, at least allegedly, from what the reporting shows, Judge Boasberg actually giving voice to concerns, not only that other judges around the country had, but giving voice to concerns that were, in fact, made true only days later when his court order was violated. So the notion that he was working to undermine the integrity or the esteem of the judiciary, something that he clearly was not doing in public, and he is, I should say, incredibly careful. Generally, he is not an intemperate person. So this is him doing exactly what he was meant to do in, I think, a way that was trying to amplify concerns around the judiciary, the notion that he was trying to influence an Article III tenured Chief Justice of the United States, or in some way speaking in a way that would allow the public to have less esteem for the judiciary. The only reason the public might have less esteem for the judiciary is because of this complaint.
David, this new complaint is the second time that the DOJ has demanded Boasberg be removed from the Alien Enemies Act case. It's also calling for him to be reprimanded publicly. And on top of that, raises the prospects that, you know, other judges here could call for his impeachment. Does this sound personal to you, and does this feel normal?
Well, no, it is absolutely not normal. And it's very personal. But it's very personal regarding Donald Trump. So the way this is working with the Trump administration in his second term is that everything is personal for him. Ruling against him is a personal affront to him, an attack on him, an attack on his legitimacy, on his authority. And so absolutely, you're seeing the Trump DOJ, you're seeing the Trump administration largely at large, essentially saying, look, if you're opposing me, if you're concerned about me, if you're expressing concern about me, there's something inherently illegitimate about this. There's something inherently problematic about this. This immediately labels you as an enemy. And if there's one thing that this administration was elected to do, was to have vengeance on Trump's enemies. And so constantly you see the same pattern. Trump's friends enjoy all of the benefits and largesse that the president of the United States can offer. Trump's enemies get the boot. They get the full force of the law, and they'll even get the law extended beyond its bounds, its rightful bounds, in this effort to take on Trump's enemies. This is all consistent with everything that's been happening since day one of this new Trump administration.
Lisa, Boasberg has been assigned to several notable cases that deal with the Trump administration's policies, including the Alien Enemies Act. What would his reassignment on something like this look like? And what does that say to you?
I think, first of all, I think that they have asked only for his reassignment with respect to one particular case. But the way that it would work if it were to happen, and I think that's a big if, is that the case would simply be taken away from him and assigned to another judge in the District of D.C., which is the federal body on which he serves. But I want to go back to the gravamen of the complaint, because in order to even get to the investigative stage, there are a bunch of thresholds that have to be met. The person who makes the complaint has to sign it and swear to it under penalty of perjury. They have to provide documentation. There is an attachment to this. It is apparently somebody's memo about what was said at this meeting. But again, it's not clear at all that Chad Mizell, who signed this complaint, was in the meeting, or that they have any witnesses that they've identified who were present in the meeting. There's a lot that has to be done here to even substantiate.
Yo me pregunto, ¿será que eso es motivo suficiente para una sanción? O bueno, a lo que quiere llegar Trump, que es un impeachment de este juez. Porque lo de Boasberg no es un caso aislado. Donald Trump lleva meses pidiendo su destitución, atacando a cualquier juez que se le cruce. La estrategia, simple, que los jueces entiendan que o se alinean con él o los destruye públicamente. Un mensaje claro para el resto del sistema judicial. O tú me obedeces o te arruino. Y no solo eso, porque también Bondi ha estado ejecutando una purga interna. Esta semana, 2 altos funcionarios antimonopolio fueron despedidos del Departamento de Justicia. Su crimen: investigar a empresas como Apple, Capital One y negarse a trabajar con los lobistas aliados de Trump. Es más, uno de ellos hasta dijo a las empresas que no se dejen manipular por consultores externos pro-Trump. El resultado, fuera, despedido por insubordinación. En otras palabras, por no seguir la línea del culto.
We turn now to the purge of officials at the Department of Justice. More than 20 employees who worked on past investigations related to President Trump and his allies were fired this past week. Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, tell me, what do we know about these latest firings and who was affected by them?
Those affected include actual prosecutors, the ones who go into the courtroom and try to secure justice and try to secure convictions. The connection between those fired, well, that's clear as day, John. They took part in one of those three cases you see there. The classified records investigation, the Mar-a-Lago case from 2022 involving President Trump, the 2020 election interference case involving President Trump, or the January 6th prosecution, which, oh, by the way, is the largest prosecution in American history. Those being fired had some fingerprints on those cases, which, John, is why so many of them are telling CBS News they believe this is a wave of retribution being enacted by the Trump administration, the Department of Justice not commenting on the firings.
Scott, it's hard to keep track of the bouncing ball here, but give us a sense of how these firings and departures have affected the kind of overall scope of the business and work they do at the Department of Justice.
This is going to impact U.S. communities. First of all, you're pulling prosecutors away when you fire them from active cases, from a fraud case in Florida to a felony violent crime in the District of Columbia. But what's more, you're just leaving them short-staffed. You have dozens of vacancies now inside the U.S. Department of Justice at a time when crime isn't just going to stop. So there's concern about the workload, the tonnage, and the effect. But it's not just prosecutors, John. Our CBS News review found administrators fired too, including the woman in Washington, D.C., who sent out the press releases and maintained the website about January 6 cases.
Scott McFarland on the Justice Beat for us in Washington. Thank you, Scott.
Todo esto está pasando mientras la fiscal del área, que es Gail Slater, tenía reuniones con la Casa Blanca y con el Consejo Económico Nacional, porque pues empezaron a preguntarse si es que ella de verdad está siguiendo las órdenes de Trump o si es que todavía tiene algo de integridad. Empresas como Hewlett Packard incluso llegaron a quejarse porque el Departamento de Justicia les advirtió que no trabajen con lobistas trumpistas, como lo es Mike Davis, como lo es Stuart Swartz. ¿Qué pasó después? Llamada desde la Casa Blanca. Despedido. Lo que estamos viendo, señores, no es un sistema de justicia, es un sistema de control. Donald Trump y Pam Bondi están utilizando el Departamento de Justicia como si fuese este escuadrón de venganza personal. Persiguen jueces, castigan funcionarios, destruyen las carreras. Y todo por una sola razón: eliminar cualquier obstáculo que se interponga en el camino del líder supremo. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video.